critical point. Dr. Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. Good to be with you again.
You've got the floor. Tell us what you see coming.
Well, even though I wrote something, I think it was about 18 pages long, but it was longer. When I was doing it, I was thinking about my special orders that I used to do on the House floor when you could get a special hour. So it goes over, the analysis of what's going on and why we have trouble and what I think we should do. But actually, the motivation for me to start to write it was just to write something much shorter and talk about the crisis in the inner city, the militarization of our police, the abuse of our civil liberties. At the same time, the demands of the inner cities, because I sympathize with those who are on the receiving end of the militarization of the police. At the same time, those individuals in the inner city are, they have been used to an entitlement mentality, and it just serves their interest to demand more and more, and then we end up in a conflict. Well, each side has different demands. I think each side are wrong to a degree, but I certainly think that the big issue of the inner cities, and I mentioned in my paper that this has been going on for a long time. I think it was even in the 60s, the riots we had in the 60s had a lot to do with the inner cities and the poverty in the inner cities. Everybody agrees there's poverty there, but some people think, well, we need more government transfer programs, which I don't agree with, but we need to understand first that we protect civil liberties for everybody equally. At the same time, we have to understand poverty. Then you have to get into economic policy. You have to get into the Federal Reserve, the destruction of the currency, the destruction of the middle class, and why the welfare state ends up getting the very wealthy people in charge of the distribution of wealth. So I've always maintained that welfareism, the principle is so bad, but it's accepted by the far left and the people who want something for free, but they don't get anything because the people who are really in charge, the bankers in the military-industrial complex, they get in charge and they use that principle to their benefit. And I think that's the mess that we're in today, because the cities are getting poorer, the middle class is being eliminated, and there's these constant demands, and I think it's because we've lost our way in the understanding of what personal liberty is all about, and property rights, and sound money, and all the things I've talked about for so long. So I saw the big debate between the militarization of the police and the people who are on the receiving end and the poverty in the inner city as a consequence of a lot of ignorance as far as what is good economic policy and what true liberty is all about. I mean, true liberty doesn't mean that you get what you want and you demand it and that you're entitled to it. That has nothing to do with liberty. That represents a violation of liberty. So that is the general theme of what I was writing about, but even though most of it was warning people and telling people what a mess I think we're in, I really conclude with a bit of optimism, as I always do, that, the Internet is providing us a vehicle for getting our message out, and I think that the message is alive and well. I think the young people are listening. I think what you do on radio and all your efforts, I think, is very beneficial, and a lot of people realize the mess we're in, that the economy is in shambles and the foreign policy is ridiculous. So they're looking for answers, and I believe the freedom movement provides those answers.
Well, and certainly we've predicted what's coming. You've written books on the subjects. We know how this works. We're not rocket scientists. This has happened hundreds and hundreds of times in history, or even more, hundreds of times in different countries just in the last few hundred years. Going back to your essay that's at ronpaulinstitute.org, we posted it at Infowars.com as well. Inner city turmoil and other crises, my predictions for 2015. I want to get into some of those other crises, but I've always been a nonpartisan constitutionalist, but I have supported libertarians who run as Republicans or Democrats, and have supported you and your son and others against statists. But the Democrats, I think, really have sunk to a new low with their open fanning of racial division, of anti-police garbage that isn't meant to reform police, but meant to create a balkanization and really to Democratic-connected groups out singing Deck the Halls with Dead Cops. I mean, we have these videos really vicious provocations that if libertarians did anything like this, we'd be arrested. And I know you're familiar with this. What do you think the attempt is there? We know unemployment's doubled for blacks under Obama. We know collectivism has hurt them more than anybody. Is this a desperate attempt to just distract and make it racial or scapegoat the police? Because I'm a critic of the police state, as are you, but not of just scapegoating the individual police.
No, and the far left likes dishevel, and they like the discord, because then they figure that they can promote their programs. Just like I said, the inner city is a mess, so they're arguing that the $16 trillion we've spent in the past 50 years on trying to get rid of poverty, starting with LBJ, they figure $32 trillion would do the job. But no, I think they're provocateurs, and I think they're small, but they do get the crowds riled up, and they sort of, I think the Al Sharptons of the world are. I think one suggestion I had made is, there's going to be a mess. There is a mess. People ought to understand the Second Amendment, and they ought to make sure that they, pay attention to the false promises of the Al Sharptons of the world. And that is why. The people, if you and I talk about this, we can get on the receiving end. Blaming blacks and all that kind of stuff. But what they ought to do is look to black leaders that we have in economic policy, and they understand this, and they understand racism because they have put up with it in their own life. And that's Walter Williams and Tom Sowell. These guys are just great. They're free market people. They believe in liberty, and they understand why there's poverty in the inner city. And I think they're fantastic. So if your listeners have not read Walter Williams and Tom Sowell, I'm sure they have, because I know your audience. But there may be some. I think it's really worthwhile looking at what they say, rather than believing that Al Sharpton talks for people. And he just aggravates things, and of course, that's generally what happens. They go in there and just stir up more trouble.
Sure. Let's elaborate briefly on that and then get into some of the other warnings and crises you see getting worse in the new year. And then I want to talk about the economy with you, and then the election coming up and more. Again, former Congressman Ron Paul of ronpaulinstitute.org is our guest. Amazing analysis, amazing essays and articles there every day, videos every day at ronpaulchannel.com. Specifically, you were alluding to the Second Amendment as a good thing to maintain order if society breaks down. Undoubtedly, I think the Democrats would like to start a limited civil war in this country. Can you elaborate on your statement about the Second Amendment's role in any type of societal breakdown?
I was thinking about, in the midst of the problem up in Ferguson, what would I do if I lived there and I had a store? I mean, it just makes no sense for the people who feel like they've been mistreated and they want to strike out against white people and the establishment. They go and destroy buildings that are owned by black people, their neighbors, the people who make a living there. They'll go and bust up their windows. So it made no sense. But it seems like there wasn't this understanding that they have a right and they should be defending their property. So, if you really had an understanding of the Second Amendment, whether you were in Ferguson or wherever, if people started breaking in and you see people jumping in and out of the broken windows and hauling off their loot, it seems to me like maybe some of that could have been averted by just somebody having a right to defend themselves, and that means the use of the Second Amendment. But evidently, that was not done. I guess maybe the rules are too strict in places like this and in the cities. So
sure.
I think there would be less of it if they knew that they were likely to be shot at if they broke into somebody's
Well, no
building.
kidding. You try to burn down my house or business, you're going to get shot. And that's not because I'm looking for trouble. That's the normal behavior. And in areas where people act like that, you don't have looting and robbing like this because folks would end up pushing daisies and not be on the green side. Ron Paul, moving quick in the 6-7 minutes we've got left with you here today. I want to get into more of your predictions, but shifting gears back to Obama himself. even Turley, the liberal professor of law, says Obama has done about triple the constitutional violations of Bush that you and I and others were big critics of as well. The Republican leadership is standing down when Obama wants to open the border, shut down more power plants, put our military under NATO control. I mean, for all intents and purposes, is Obama not setting the precedent for an imperial presidency, and what should be done about it?
Well, he's continuing it, but that's been going on for so long. I mean, we could go back and study Woodrow Wilson.
Sure.
He was no saint, you know, and even though some of that stuff, our government's backed off after Wilson was out of office and after he died, but the process has continued. You know, we haven't really had a constitutional president in a long, long time. So whether it was Bush and Obama's just building on this. Executive order's been around for a long time. We've been going to war with executive orders and without declarations. We have a monetary system that can bail out anybody, everybody, not only in the United States and our corporations, but worldwide. Trillions and trillions of dollars, and that's not done with approval. I think the Congress is totally derelict in their responsibility because they allow it to happen. And policies come, and the Fed does what they please. There's no limits on which friends they can bail out. So it is a process, and yes, he's an imperial president, but he's just following in the footsteps of others. And he had especially been bad on the curtailment of freedom of speech. You talk about all this talk about what was going on in France. I wish they would deal with, what is going on in this country, because Obama's been known to put people in prison if they don't reveal their sources, and so it's freedom of speech is being attacked here as well.
Well, that's right. On the heels of this so-called ISIS hack that's now been traced back to Maryland and U.S. sources, just like the North Korea hack was fake, now Obama, AFP reports, has renewed push for cybersecurity and restricting internet freedom. Ron Paul, do you buy into ISIS being able to hack U.S. military sites and take them over, or do you think this might be a false flag?
Well, I'm always skeptical. What was it that they were blaming the North Koreans on not long ago? I said, they can't even turn on their lights. They don't have any lights there. It's a dark country, and they were accusing them of this expertise in something, on the internet. And I was very doubtful. So, yes, whether it's a deliberately planned false flag or whether it is accidental or a blowback or an unintended consequence, it's always used to expand the state. And then when there is a problem, there's an assassination or a bombing, and we have a government investigation. Let's have an investigation. Well, the investigation isn't to seek out truth, and most of the time we never get to truth, but we do get the defense of the government. When this torture issue came up, and they had this, right now they're not releasing the report, in the Congress, and they should. But they talked about all the torturers, and they're finding out that people were breaking the law right and left. But none of them get punished. None of them go to prison. Nobody got penalized for messing up on the information that was available before 9/11. But for the torturers, the only person that went to prison is the CIA agent that came clean and warned us and told us the truth about it, so we put him in prison. That's what is disgusting, and that is what people have to know. And we're making progress here. I think it's like 80% of the people are very untrusting toward the government. And you think, oh, well, that's terrible. You don't want people untrusting. Yeah, but if the government is not taking care of us and protecting our liberties, if the people are waking up and all of a sudden saying, hey, we can't really rely on the government to tell us the truth, that means they have to seek the truth someplace else, and hopefully we all can provide that for them.
Well, absolutely. In the few minutes we've got left, some of the other predictions that are in your essay that's up at ronpaulinstitute.org and Infowars.com, other predictions or crises you see in 2015. And then briefly, I want to talk about, I believe Rand Paul is the best person for president. It's obvious he's going to run. The news just said a few weeks ago, of course he's going to run. You've said it 6-8 months ago. Sure. Rand Paul's getting ready. Ted Cruz. You see Jeb Bush. Absolutely terrible. Might as well just have Hillary. You've got Hillary, but is this a dynasty where we're going to have King George IX or King Clinton XII? We're not North Korea or England. There's got to. In fact, let's cover that first. Election coming up 2016, it's pretty much already starting. Where do you, I mean, obviously you support your son, but he is the best candidate there. I like Ted Cruz as well. And then it just gets worse from there.
Yeah. No. Obviously, Rand is doing quite well. And they have to sort of, you know, they were giving him some attention, and it wasn't all bad. It was decent, and a lot of people know him now, and they like what he's been saying. But all of a sudden, what has happened the last couple of weeks? First, it was they didn't want Rand and others to get much attention, so they had to divert the attention. Then they say, "Oh, Bush is going to run. Jeb Bush is a great candidate. And Bush. He's getting ready, and he's going to have the money, and he's our guy." But then there's dissension among the ranks, and evidently Romney wasn't too pleased to just step back. So he's maybe I'm going to run. So the media plays this up. Now the only two candidates that seem to exist will be Bush and Romney.
That's right.
So that's their way of exclusion. It's sometimes even when they say, well, there's now 10 people, 15 people going to run, they'll include Rand, but it's not where it was by all the polling, a month ago. These guys didn't even show up, but all of a sudden, which means that he's on the receiving end that I guess I could say I had received as well. They know how to handle it in the public if they think you're doing too well,
sure.
And they don't want you to succeed.
Well, that's why I thought it was smart that Rand started basically doing presidential-type election things first, so that he would get the attention up front and is still a front runner in most polls. That's why they're scared and are trying to only put Jeb Bush and Romney out there and make that fight all about it. We don't need Mitt Romney after 2 runs. We don't need Jeb Bush. My goodness. We don't need Chris Christie. These guys are just Democrats or Beltway Republican rhinos. We need Rand Paul. I mean, he is just the best candidate across the board. I mean, what do you say to the libertarian and constitutionalist troops out there? What can they do to really make sure that Rand stays at the top of the ticket?
Well, I'm not too keen on giving people precise advice. A lot of people have asked me, and I would sort of try to dismiss it a bit and say, well, do whatever you want. If you want to be involved, get involved. If you like a candidate, support him, campaign. And I thought that was what was so neat about our campaign,
sure.
Is that a lot of people did spontaneously do a lot of things that organize and raise money. So I think that people need to do something to be helpful. And sometimes it's running for office, and at the same time you're running for office, you can speak out about all the issues and all the other candidates.
Sure.
So it's something that the individuals has to decide. Even if an individual is much more into education and all, teaching people why they should understand the issues that we're pushing, on the sound money and civil liberties, that to me is very important. You have to change people's
Absolutely.
attitudes, and that would help a person like Rand as well.
Ron, you've got to go. You're already over.
Right.
I want to get any other just quick predictions, but please say to Rand, just my layman advice, do what Ted Cruz is doing, attacking Jeb Bush and attacking Romney as squishy middle, because that's what we need to keep him at the top. From my view, he needs to come out in a classy way, obviously, and point out how bad Jeb Bush is, point out how bad Chris Christie is, point out how bad Romney is compared, or they are going to really try to push him to the back. Anything else you think is important for 2015 to warn people about?
No, other than the fact that I think our economic crisis is going to continue. It's going to get worse during this year. It's not going to get better. The government is going to try to play it up that things are getting better. I think our foreign policy is going to continue. I think it's very, very dangerous. And this country has to face up to the fact that it's bankrupt. If it doesn't, things are going to get much worse before it gets better.
RonPaulInstitute.org. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Godspeed.
Very good. Thanks.
All right, there he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Ron Paul joining us for the last 25 minutes or so. Exclusive, intense, in-depth, real question interview. Rand Paul is the best. I trust him. I've known him for, I can't believe it's 18, 19 years. 19 years. And he's the guy for president. Ted Cruz will make a great VP, but I'm telling you, Ted Cruz is getting more aggressive. That's why in polls, he's now number one. In real polls, Ted Cruz is now taking the lead because he's being aggressive. It's what people want. They want to see Boehner attacked.